Tells a technical family. How do I put the volume up? I just press this.
Look on the keyboard there.
Oh, that one. Right, say something.
Hello,
Okay.
hello.
Can you hear us?
That's better. Now I can hear you properly. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Great.
Good. So I think we have most of our people here today, and I just want to thank everybody for joining, especially because here on the East Coast, it's a beautiful day, and we've just had so much rain. It's like, of course, today would be the beautiful day, Saturday. So thank you so much for joining us. I want to introduce, do you prefer Elizabeth or Liz?
Don't mind. Liz is fine. Yeah.
Liz, okay. So Liz is our special guest today, and she is a master of wine, and she's been in the industry since about like 1986.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, 1986. And initially your focus was French wines, which I understand you just shared with us that you live in France, but then eventually you started moving to Central Europe as far as your study there, and then also Hungarian wines too, which is an interesting combination there. You are currently the president of the International Rosé Championship, which is a pretty cool thing, I think, to be the president of. And recently, I would say 2 years ago, you wrote the book that we're going to talk about today, which is Rosé, the Pink Revolution. And if you have not had an opportunity to pick it up, I would encourage you, because reading this was like a great historical understanding about rosé, but it was a roadmap to, if you wanted to travel the world and you only had to take a backpack full of 2 days change of clothes, and Chanel can tell us how to pack really easily. And this book, it would take you to every region, and you would know the great places to go. And you even mentioned a Virginia, Barboursville in here. And so in your next print, then you can mention Windridge, a Maryland winery in here as well. So I want to thank you so much, Liz. And if you could just tell us about yourself.
Right. So I think everyone, most people heard, I know there are even more people now. I specialized.
She can go out after I do this meeting.
Whoops.
All right.
Oh, okay. I'm going to mute.
Mute. Yeah, I think with the European wine, which is what I started off with, you know, we have this very, very close relationship between French wine and the UK market historically for a very, very long time. And so it was quite obvious when I first started in the 1980s that I would sell French wine. And I suppose, like a lot of people, I had family that came on holiday down to Provence. It was the easiest place to sort of come to, have a holiday home, go to the beach. And a lot of people said to me, oh, but, you know, have you tried Provence wine? And I was a complete novice. I remember trying a Chardonnay from South Africa, saying, but Chardonnay comes from France. How can you have a Chardonnay from South Africa? And my friend said to me, it's a grape, can come from other places. And I'm kind of going, really? Gosh, you know. So really, like, I started off like any other novice, just learning about wine. And I would bring back Provence Rosé, which was dark and lasted 2 months. And that was it. I didn't really go much further than that. And Provence wine really wasn't so exciting. And so I moved a bit more to Hungary, and I worked a lot in Hungary. And then 3 years ago, a publisher approached me and said, you're a Provence specialist. Would you like to write a book about rosé? And I have to be honest, I did not like rosé. I never drank rosé. I live up in the mountains. We don't have a swimming pool. I never sat by a swimming pool with a glass of rosé. And the first thing my husband said to me was, "You don't like rosé." And I said, "But it's going to be a little book. You know, what is there to write about rosé?" That was my first reaction. And I thought, get it done in a couple of months. There is nothing to write. And Provence, I don't know if any of you have seen Provence marketing for rosé, but their big banner is, "This is where rosé was invented 2,000 years ago." And my first degree was history. And I kind of felt that seemed a bit odd. You know, the thought of Romans sitting round their pool with a glass of rosé just didn't really ring very true, which is why I started researching rosé around the world. And what was the biggest shock, I think, was the history of rosé in America, because everyone talks about white zin, white zin, white zin, bit of Grenache, and there really was nothing about rosé in America. And then discovering that it was the American soldiers over in Europe during the Second World War that kick-started the rosé market. They came over, the army needed wine for the soldiers. And after Prohibition in America, they'd been very used to Grenache, which had been used for fortified wine, sacramental fortified wine, making some sort of dark rosé. So they approached Portuguese producers, Italian producers. Can you make off-dry rosé for the American troops? This is what they were going to serve them, which they did. And after the war, Mateusz, Lancers, and Five Roses, which were the big suppliers to American soldiers, said, well, we have a captive market. We have all these American GIs now going back to America. We're going to start making rosé with them. And then there's this amazing history of producers in California following on this trend of making rosé. But the white zin market came quite late. It was an accident, and it was a very, very successful commercial accident. So the American history of rosé really is very, very significant as far as global rosé is concerned. But then what was interesting when I was researching the book, California makes American rosé. And then I kept on getting winemakers saying, yes, but there's this state and this state and this state. And I think every single state in America now makes wine.
Every state makes
every single state. But we don't get it over in Europe. And you would say to producers, well, okay, so you're making some really nice rosé. Can you send some to me to taste? And people go, no, it's just not worth it, the cost of sending wine. So I'll tell you a story about this. So I wanted to taste a rosé from Windridge Vineyards in Oregon, who makes a really nice rosé. So I rang up Jason Letts and I said, can you send me a bottle for the book? And he said, no. He said, it's going to cost me $200 to send you one bottle. And by the time the amount of wine I will need to sell to cover this cost isn't going to work. So this is the power of social media. So I then went onto my Facebook page and saw I knew a French winemaker in Oregon. So I messaged him and I said, do you have any space in your rucksack, your backpack, to bring back a bottle? And he said, no, sorry, it's full. And then I saw an English wine writer was also in Oregon. So I messaged her. So we're about 5 minutes after I've come off the phone to the vineyard. I said, do you have space in your suitcase? Could you go to this vineyard and get a rosé bottle from this vineyard? And she messaged back and she said, you're not going to believe it. I've just walked in the doorway of this vineyard. So within 5 minutes of me calling, she walked in and said, can I have a bottle of rosé to take back to Liz? And it's kind of like, what? What happened there? So I got my bottle and I tasted it. So that was quite an exciting, the power of social media. but American Rosé remains really, really unknown over here. So I was very excited. I don't know if any of you know, I think 3 weeks ago you sent me this rosé.
Oh yes, it was like on the slow boat to China.
It arrived yesterday.
And it just arrived yesterday. So thank goodness. What I'd like us to do, I want to introduce Robert and Kathy and Roy. They are with Windridge. There's Roy. And they are with Windridge Vineyards, which is located outside of Darnestown, Maryland. And they were very kind enough to allow us to sip their wine today. And so those who have the rosé, make sure you open it up. We're going to do a little cheers first. So fill your glass if you have not. It's afternoon, so it's okay to have some wine right now.
Had my bottle at the other computer.
There we go. And I just want to say a cheers to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Cheers to you. And here's to great rosé.
I'm the only one. Oh no, most people. It's interesting the glasses that people are using. Some of you have got these tumbler glasses.
Yes.
Is that very fashionable?
It is.
Okay.
It definitely is. So
outdoor spaces, yeah.
Yes, yeah, especially, and we, Liz, we often do wine tours, and so we give away glasses with our wine tours. And initially, we used to use stem glasses. Then at the end of the wine tour, you would find like broken glasses in the back of the vehicle. So we started moving towards the stemless ones, and they seem to be the best so far. So if you could take us through, you had an opportunity not just to have the 2019
vintages,
but you also have the 2018. And if you could just walk us through a wine tasting of both of those wines. Most of everyone has the 2019 now. Yes.
Okay, so when I first took the bottles out of the box, and I thought, ooh, very, very different variation on color. So I was very relieved to see that I had 2 different vintages. So yes, I'll be very curious to hear what Robert and Kathy say. The 2018 is darker, sort of much more pronounced pink color, and the 2019 a bit more of a salmon pink color. And I have no idea what the grape varieties are. And I have no idea about where the Piedmont Plateau, any characteristics about it. But I just thought the 18 is lots of raspberry, wild raspberry, sour cherry fruit, very, very crunchy acidity. Proof that rosé does age quite well. You know, we're talking an older vintage, but it's still tasting really, really beautifully. A very, very fresh, vibrant acidity, but with a nice sort of dryness on the finish, which I think is quite important with rosé, because we taste normally rosé as an aperitif. A lot of people drink rosé as an aperitif. They don't always notice that dry finish at the end, which makes it a bit better to go with food. And this wine has all the fruit, and at the end, that slight dry flip at the end, which I think makes it more of a serious rosé.
So Robert and Kathy, if you guys could tell us about what's actually in our glass.
I just finished with the 2019 before you say anything, because it's very, very different. Less fruity, a bit more of a Provence style, in that it's a bit more herbal, much more dry, much more restrained fruit, which could be youth, or it could be that you've changed your winemaking style quite a bit. So yes, so I'd be very curious to hear what the differences are on these two wines.
Yeah, so first, thank you, Leslie. Just wanted to give you a quick shout out to say thank you so much for putting this together. You came by our tasting room last summer, and I was the one that actually gave you the tasting.
Yeah, you did.
It was very much a pleasure to meet you in person.
Oh, it was great. It was really great.
Mm-hmm.
The world. So I wanted to say the description of the wines.
I've lost sound.
The big grape that you're talking about that is predominantly is the Chamberson. Are you familiar with that varietal?
I didn't hear. Sorry, which was it?
Can you get a little closer? Because we're having a hard time hearing you.
Yes, sorry about that.
Well, let's move here real quick.
So Chamberson is the predominant varietal in both of these, except there's a little bit of a difference. So the 2018, it's about 95% or 90% Chamberson. The rest was the Saignée bleed off of some of the Bordeaux varietals that we grow here as well. So that being Cab Sauv, Petit Verdot, Cab Franc. And then on the 19, we did a whole cluster press. So gravity base, gravity splits open the berries, all the juice gets plenty of time to get some nice coloration. And then as it's...
Whoop.
Uh-oh, I think we lost you.
Keep going. No, yeah. Whole cluster press.
Oh, yes, on the 2019.
Yes.
That being all Chamberson. We did not do the Saignée bleed on that one. So that was just the whole cluster of Chamberson.
So it really was very different winemaking between the two wines.
Yeah, absolutely. You called it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those who are not wine nerds like myself, what's the difference to someone about if you use the Saignée method versus the whole cluster press? Like, why does that make a difference to anybody aside from what's in your glass?
It's going to allow, well, coloration certainly is going to.
No, okay, so, yeah. I think we've lost it.
It's also going to change the viscosity and the acidity level as well. So it can change texturally the way the mouthfeel of the wine sits on your palate. You know, does it linger a little bit more? Is it quicker? Am I getting still the same amount of acidity, but is it cleaner in any way? All of those can be variants that change.
I think what's interesting with Saignée is, it's a French verb to bleed. So it's bleeding the juice off the press. I think one of the problems is a lot of people associate it with leftovers from red wine, but when you've only got 5%, it's not a negative. You're not going to have anything extra. But what is interesting with the whole bunch press, this was something that started off the Provence Rosé revolution, in that in 1988, when Régine Sumer experimented with whole bunch press on the rosé, you get much more lighter, more delicate, fresher, paler fruit, which is why we've got the difference between these two wines. You're yeah.
No, you called it exactly, really. It's
this is the
We're
joy.
having a hard time hearing you.
I don't know if any of you saw, there was a very good comedy sketch about by the end of this lockdown, how many times we'll be staring at a screen saying, we've lost the connection,
Exactly.
we can't hear you. But I think it's a very interesting trend with Rosé. I mean, I quite like the Saignée. I do like the extra fruit that comes through, and possibly there's a market for the two different styles. What made Windridge decide to change style?
Can you hear us better?
Can hear you, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think for us, really, one of the nice things about what we're doing in Maryland is so many of us are still sort of growing. And I'm not sure that we've adopted a style yet on what we want our rosé to be. And so we wanted to maybe freshen up a bit from 2018. I wanted the fruit to express more cleanly, which is why we went to this sort of whole cluster method. But I don't think we're done experimenting and refining really what our.
And what sort of vintage variation do you have? I mean, is it a climate where you have every year is very different?
Yeah, very, and we definitely have vintages in the East Coast. We're more European that way than California for sure. We have rains and we have humidity and we're capable of making good wine, excellent wine. But no, you'll definitely have vintage variation.
So what will you do for the 2020 vintage, do you think?
Well, that's interesting you bring that up because we have had the worst freeze that we have had in the state of Maryland since the late 1800s.
No.
And so a lot of our primary fruit, primary buds have been frosted off.
Okay.
So it'll be very interesting to see what we do. I have a feeling that it'll be some of the red wines aren't really going to ripen properly for full red wine. So we'll probably look to harvest them early, maybe for rosé. But it'll definitely be a different year for us for sure.
Oh, that's a problem. That's something normally we think of, having that sort of frost problem, changing things.
It's not normal, but it happens occasionally.
We've had a very cool spring. More than 2020 has been, let's just throw it out because for so many different reasons, 2020 has been unprecedented, if that word can't be used over abundantly. And so it's been really cool here. That's why today is so pleasantly pleasing, because it is a nice spring day. And as you can tell by the wind in the background there,
Really?
that
So what sort of temperature do you have?
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, normally climatically for what you're used to, if you would think sort of like southern Germany, France, that sort of area is sort of what our climate would be. We're a little different in that we can get a bit more tropical rainfall sometimes than Europe is used to seeing. So our weather's a little variable. And then in August, we probably tend to get a little hotter than some of those regions get. But yeah, no, very, very kind of classic temperate climate, really.
So why have you used Chambourcin? Just curious, it's a grape variety that.
Yeah, so it's an excellent question, and it's one of the things that I actually really enjoy about what we're doing here is that nobody's been growing grapes in the state of Maryland for hundreds or thousands of years because they figured it out, right? And so a lot of us are sort of experimenting. And really the reason that I chose Chambourcin is that it grows very, very well here. The grape thrives in our climate. It's a very reliable cropper. It's a grape that we can grow because it's a hybrid. We can grow it in a very sustainable method. Herbicide. And so there's a lot, makes a nice wine.
I mean, for me, it's quite interesting. If I was comparing it to a European rosé style, I think I would think of a Beaujolais rosé or Chiaretto from Bardolino. You know, it has that Gamay Corvina style fruit, wild cherries. Question, are all rosés dry? No. No, you can get ice wine rosé, you can get sweet off dry, dry, the full range going. But these, as I say, very much like Corvina and Gamay, which are always dry, but with this lovely cherry, sour cherry, raspberry type fruit. So I think that's what I would try these against, as a similar sort of style. Have you tried those?
Yeah, the reason we turned and we're smiling is for our full skin ferment Chamberson, we actually do go for that Gamay Beaujolais
Right.
stylization, and versus a lot of people will kind of angle it more towards a Pinot.
Yeah.
And purposely, Robert and Nick, our winemaker, aimed closer to that Beaujolais mark. So that's kind of why we turned and smiled as soon as you said that.
It's I mean, it's work. So to what would I eat with it? So I'm very curious with rosé because of this Provence emphasis. People always go Provence style food, and then they say salade niçoise, which isn't Provence, it's niçoise. But I think this sort of very crisp style, it's something that I really think fish is really nice with it because it's not too acidic and it doesn't have the tannin. Tannins and fish for me don't always work terribly well, but it has that lovely crispness. I think I'm not a sommelier, you know, I just if it works, I think it works. And yeah. So what would anyone else? Sauteed scallops.
Ooh.
From Matt. Yeah. Again, sort of fish, seafood.
Goat cheese. Terry is saying goat cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah, we made a little charcuterie plate.
Yeah, we did a little charcuterie. So some
perfect
prosciutto and some. This is actually a goat cheese with cranberry. It's a locally made goat cheese with cranberry and horseradish. So we're gonna try it and we'll see how it works.
That does sound good. Yes.
I think a little spice, yeah.
When you have if you hold that 2019 in your mouth,
I think Maryland crab.
Yeah, it has that cranberry acidity, doesn't it? That just keeps going, which is really, really nice. Just a moment. Are you going to call out the questions, Leslie? Because I'm going to miss.
Sure.
them.
Yes. So, rosé is a summertime favorite, but can you talk about that? Because now it's becoming year round. It's not, people are having rosé all of the time and not just during the summer.
So last night I did a Zoom chat with some natural rosé producers, some really funky rosé. We had rosé as dark as a red wine, aged in Solera. We had a very, very traditional Ribera del Duero rosé. And my big argument when people say I sound belligerent, saying that rosé is only for the summer. Do you say white wine is only for the summer? No, you don't. You say, well, it depends if it's an oak-aged Chardonnay or if it's a very zesty Sauvignon Blanc or whatever. And I think one of the problems with the rosé market is that there is over 50% of rosé production in the world is made in a dry Provence style, which makes it very difficult for a consumer to find something slightly different. But if you can find different styles, I think it can go all year. So things like Negramaro rosé from Puglia, or I don't know, presumably you may have Negramaro even in, I don't know, Texas, Mediterranean style, has a it's fine, but it's almost quite gutsy, very good acidity and a touch of tannin, often because of Saignée. Somebody mentioned sweet wine earlier. If you go to the Loire, Cabernet d'Anjou and Rosé d'Anjou, they make it so there is a balance of sugar and acidity. And something like Cabernet d'Anjou, which is, you know, over 10 grams per litre of sugar, but so much acidity. I don't know, I guess you don't do grams per litre in America?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of sugar. But because it's very balanced with the acidity, fantastic with tomatoes, you know, tomato salad, which can kill off almost every other wine, and great with goat's cheese. And the oldest rosé I had was a Cabernet d'Anjou 1959.
Wow.
Lots of acidity, lots of sugar, ended up full of dried fruit. I mean, masses of dried fruit, beautifully balanced, made by a producer who makes Coteau de Leon. I had an old Negromaro from 1976. Again, that lovely structure. And one thing that I have learned is, okay, so we're talking about these two rosés, and we're talking about fresh fruit, and we're talking about acidity, and we're talking about primary fruit character, this sour cherry, wild raspberry type fruit. And this is a vocabulary that we understand for young rosé. And we do not yet have a vocabulary for rosé with a bit of age. So the amount of times, even with other wine professionals, I can show a rosé that's 5 years old, that is still beautiful, has lovely acidity. It's a well-structured rosé, and people go, well, it doesn't taste the same as a young rosé. And I go, well, of course it, I'm not quite so polite, of course it doesn't. It's got 5 years. You wouldn't say that about a red or a white wine. And rosé does develop slightly complex secondary character, and quite often that slightly older rosé is better with food than when it's young. And a lot of rosé, as far as I'm concerned, is drunk far too young. You know, this 2018 is showing beautifully fresh and vibrant, and we need to move away from this obsession of trying to consume rosé in the Northern Hemisphere by September or Thanksgiving or whatever. You know, it is like any other wine. It is I mean, I'm a strong believer that wine is very artistic. I don't like wine that's just commercial and mass produced, and you know, we can all do that. But a wine that is an artistic creation, we need to be able to understand it and allow it to develop and allow it to age and appreciate some of those changing fruit characters. So anyway, that's my soapbox.
So that's interesting because you don't hear about older vintages of rosé. You just hear like now, like current vintages of it, but you do encourage people aging rosé.
Definitely. I mean, quite curiously, in that America, I don't know why, this last summer was the first time in America that they didn't sell out of Provence rosé by the end of the season. And a lot of wine merchants across America, we were getting messages back going, we still have the old vintage in stock and we don't know what to do with it. And the wine merchants say, trying to convince customers that the older vintage is still good and is still worth trying. So you get like Domaine Tempier from Bandol. For me, is not worth trying until it's 4 years old. Young Tempier is really not worth it. It needs that time to open out.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. So I have a couple of questions in the chat, and Trisha asked, Liz, do you have a favorite rosé now after writing the book?
I've got a few.
Can you share?
Really like Tondoña Lopez de Heredia from Rioja. Interestingly, the current vintage is 2009. It's aged in oak. They keep it in barrel for 4 years and then 4 years in bottle. And it is the most complex rosé, really, really beautiful. I really like, I'm not a natural wine freak, but I do like the quirkiness of natural wine. So one of my favorites comes from this very alternative Austrian rosé winemaker called Johannes Zillinger. As I say, makes it in Solera, whole bunch fermentation. It's dark red, but no tannins. And if you're a red wine drinker, it's definitely the rosé. Austrian rosé for me is one of the top. Austrian rosé is amazing. You know, they have this high quality with some very, very good wines coming out of there. Lovely fresh acidity and some very nice winemaking. I like Greek rosé. You know, Greek rosé has some very interesting things. Zinamavro, actually Zinamavro would be very interesting compared to these because it has that sort of gamay character coming through, that fresh red fruit and acidity. And quite often they add in Moscofiliero, which is a slightly muscaty grape, which sort of counterbalances some of the freshness and the acidity. And something that I'm working on now for an article, which has sort of come up, is Muscat rosé, which sounds quite strange. So black Muscat rosé is very, very old historically. It's a grape variety that came up from Greece across the Black Sea to the Crimea. So the Russian Emperor Tsars had pink Muscat rosé. You get it across Romania. And then the Venetian Empire brought it from Greece, and then it crossed northern Italy and then across southern France. So it's got very, very small production, but it's a really interesting, very, very pretty wine, from dry all the way to sweet. So yes, I have quite a few favorites, but so I like crisp and fresh. To be quite honest, I don't really like Provence rosé.
We have a question from Miss Pat. Does the grape determine the kind of wine, or is it the process?
Both.
Both.
So there's a lot of rosé made harvested early to keep acidity, pressed, very short skin maceration, cold temperature, fermented in tanks, cold temperature. And a lot of rosés, I mean, if you look at yeast catalogs, what they use for rosé, you get strawberry fruit, grapefruit, the whole range of fruit that you can get. So that's very much a winemaking led rosé. And I would say, you know, it's like any commercial wine. This is something that for consistency year in, year out. But then you have the grape varieties. So something like Grenache from Provence is a grape that has a lot of good sugar, so that even if you harvest it a bit earlier, the fruit is very ripe. And it has a lot of this raspberry fruit, but also a lot of weight, round weight for it. You have grapes like this, or as I say, Gamay or Corvina, which has this crispness and the lovely bright fruity character. Depending on the thickness of the skin, altitude. In Rioja, they're doing, some of the top producers are now making rosé at 400 to 600 meters altitude, which gives the wines lots of acidity and thicker skin. And with the thicker skin, you end up with a bit more structure. So yes, there are the two branches. There's the technical winemaking style, but then there's also the grape variety, and then color. You know, Syrah will be more purple, Grenache will be a bit more salmon color. So there is a lot of variation. Oh, and Touriga Nacional from the Douro. A lot of port producers can't sell their port, so they're now making rosé. Oh. Really, really nice. Some really exciting wine coming out from there.
So this is a question for Windridge. Do you have older vintages? From Terry.
Of rosé. So 2017 was our first vintage in still wine, and we didn't start making rosé until 2018. So 2018 is actually our first rosé vintage.
And it's funny because
Good year,
isn't that the year where we had all of that rain in 2018? Is that the year?
Yes.
Yes. So when it rained all summer long and right before harvest is when we had that. Yeah. June has a question, and I would like to try a red rosé wine. What do you recommend?
A red rosé wine. So very, very historical. This is the oldest style of rosé. The trouble is that they're losing out, so it's quite difficult to get them. So if you can find from Bordeaux a wine that's called Claret, Clairet, that tends to be much more of a red wine rosé. Tavel is another darker rosé. Rosé de Ricci, which is probably quite pricey. I don't even know if it's shipped out, but that is one of the darkest, has quite long fermentation on the skin, Pinot Noir, and nice and dark. And then another style which you get in Germany, a bit in Hungary, Switzerland, is called Schiller, which is Schiller, which is the Claret of Central Europe. And quite often, well, it depends. There are some Alsace winemakers that still make slightly darker rosé. Not many, but there are a few. Where else? Oh, Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo in Italy. Cerasuolo meaning cherry, so that's Cerasuolo. So it's the rosé from Abruzzo halfway down. And the legend is that when they collected the grapes, the landowners said, "We will have the free run juice, you can have the rest." And so, of course, no, the pickers could have the free run juice and give the grapes to the owner. So as the juice seeped out of the basket, they got this quite dark rosé. I don't know if that's true, but that's quite a dark red wine rosé. Quite a bit of Greek rosé is still dark. There are a few producers in Spain, but it's not by appellation. It really is by producer. But Spain still has some quite dark rosé, more of a red wine drinking rosé.
So let me ask you this question. Is color an indication of, is the rosé good or bad, or is it just a characteristic of that particular rosé?
Depends on the country, I think. So in South Africa, they have darker rosé, which is saignéed off the red, which has a bit of tannins. So traditionally, they add quite a bit of muscat to mask the tannin. Uruguay, the same. Uruguay is over 50% of its production is rosé. A lot, it's amazing. You kind of think, what? But they do a lot of Saignée and they add a bit of muscat. So one of the traditions with rosé where it was bled off the red was to cover the tannins they left in residual sugar. So if you don't know the producer, Australia as well, but outside of that, it's a style thing. And you can get darker rosés which taste like boiled sweets, or you can get darker rosés from the places that I've mentioned, which are really much more structured rosé. So the color could be sweet, it could be fruity, or it can be structured. And this is one of the big problems with selling rosé, is that there is no indication. If you look at a label, if you look at the color, what does that tell you? And I think rosé producers are still learning how to describe their wine. You know, the back label is actually very, very important, but color, sadly, is not an indication. It's a vague guideline, but not a hard, fast indication.
Okay. So if oh, we have a question from Matt. Were you doing something in Cyprus?
Well, yes, I've just actually received 2 bottles of Muscat, the only producer who makes black Muscat Rosé from Cyprus. So they've just arrived. And I did taste Rosé from Cyprus, which caused, when I was writing the book, which caused enormous outcry because a lot of producers said, but you didn't taste my rosé. And I said, well, you didn't send it, you know, so I can only taste what you send. And it's been on the cards that I visit for a while. Nice high altitude, indigenous varieties, and some nice quality coming through. So yeah, Matt, I'm thinking about it.
So if after today, everybody is already a rosé fan, but if they're inspired to go to their local wine store, what should they be looking for when they're selecting their rosé?
No, I don't know really. I mean, I guess, what would I look for? I think I would, if I was buying, I don't often buy rosé, I have to admit. If I was looking for rosé, I think I would look for small producers. The little people, I think there's I think one of the problems with large volume rosé production is that by default, they have to make the same wine year in and year out. And I like vintage variation. I like to feel the winemaker, you know, like you're testing the rosé and you're trying it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see the volumes that some of these big people are producing, it is a factory line. So yeah, if I was going into a shop, I would look for the small producer. And if you recognize the name, avoid it because possibly it's too big. Go to local vineyards and try, but it really is the small people with rosé. You know, in Provence, 75% of production is big négociants. And people forget, you know, things like Mirabeau is, you know, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie is a big négociant. They go around the cooperatives, they buy in juice. Whispering Angel, big négociant. They go around, they buy in the fruit, they do a blend of the region. And personally, I would prefer a wine that wasn't perfect, but I felt it had the stamp of a local producer or a small producer. So that's what I would go for. Exactly the same as you would for top red and white, but that's what I would go for. And it's not always price. You know, you think Whispering Angel is what, $25 a bottle? More? Yeah. You know, that's a lot of money for a wine that is year in, year out identical for me. Yeah. I can see people nodding.
So where do you see rosé going now? That it's, you know, it's really popular. Where do you see the future of rosé?
I think it's going to split possibly into 2 different styles. I see, you know, like these natural rosé winemakers I was talking to last night. I said, well, where do you sell your wine? You know, it's dark, it's got lots of guts and character, a bit quirky. The New York restaurant scene, New York wine bars, okay, maybe not operating right now, but New York wine scene is very, very vibrant. We're all quite jealous over here. Japan, you know, they'll buy anything that's slightly different. Wines that are slightly different, that are going to be very sommelier or very hand selling. You get a lot of vineyards that say people come in, and if the winemaker can talk them through the rosé, people are more likely to buy. So I think there is this niche side of rosé as people learn about it. And then there are people who just want the fun. you know, to be quite honest, I'm of an age where I'm not going to be sitting around in a bikini on a boat drinking pale pink rosé. That's not going to be me. So that Instagram marketing thing is going to pass me by. My daughter is very, you know, my daughter's 21. She's very happy Instagram me with a drink. So I think maybe, okay, I say two different markets. There's the niche market. There's the young 21-year-old drinking pale pink by a swimming pool, feeling glamorous. And maybe there's the middle of the road where we're saying, I'm cooking a special meal at home and I want a rosé during the summer that is going to go with food. And how many of us take pictures of us with a glass of rosé every day? You know, we don't. So, you know, I think maybe we're going to start seeing a lot more, much more diversity, or maybe it's my wishful thinking. I don't know. But if I'm looking for a rosé, I'm looking for character. I'm not looking for, as I say, the image.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that's the way it will go. And I don't know. I mean, Prosecco yesterday launched a pink Prosecco.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like
Wow,
they need more sales or whatever. I don't know. But it's not what I would go for.
You spoke a lot about natural wines, and so for those who aren't familiar with natural wines, can you just give people a brief difference between natural wines and what we have in our glasses now?
Okay, well, I mean, I don't know about your winemaking. Natural wine, I'm not a sort of religious convert to natural wine. You know, there's an American writer, Alice Faring, that did the natural wine book. There are a number of people who will not swallow anything that isn't natural. So natural in the sense that the vineyards are completely natural, no pesticides, which would have been great for you in 2018 with all that rain. I bet you were cursing the rain. Then spontaneous fermentation. So when I talk natural, I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of spontaneous fermentation. That, as I said earlier, you can buy for rosé in particular yeasts which can reduce the color, can heighten the fruit. You can do a lot of, you know, you can add all sorts of things. There are filtration methods for taking out color. So you actually contrive it. So what I would be looking for, I adore spontaneous fermentation on rosé. I just think it gives it, lets the grape variety sing a bit more. Natural rosé, yeah, they're all the extremes. So, okay, let's just stick with the spontaneous fermentation, I think. Otherwise, you can get no sulfur, you can get, you know, foot treading, the works. You can go very, very extreme or not. Sorry. It's a very, very complicated issue.
No problem. And we just have two more questions. One, any rosé in Cahors?
Yes, actually there is. So we're looking at sort of Malbec rosé. Malbec's actually quite nice. Not as much as you would think, because I think a lot gets diverted for the red, but the few that I have tried have been very good. Chateau Chambert? Can't remember the name right now, but I can message you later, where they do a very nice, quite structured. You were talking about a red wine style rosé. Some of the Cahors producers actually make quite a nice structured, maybe a little bit more tannin in their rosés. Yes.
And then lastly, what is your favorite grocery store brand? Do you have one?
No, I live in a tiny village of 1,000 people. We don't really have a grocery store that has branded rosé. It's no, so I'm afraid I can't help with that. it's very, French rustic life. We have a market and not a lot of branded rosé. I'm actually tasting Languedoc rosé for an article right now. And last year they sent me 100 rosé. I was away and my husband rang me and he went, "This pallet has arrived outside the house."
Oh my gosh.
And I was kind of like, "Oh yes, I forgot to tell you, can you bring it in?" And it was a hot weekend and I had to taste the wine. So I'd got 50 bottles in the bath, 25 in the fridge, and I was rotating them as I could taste them. And there were some stunning wines. So this year with COVID lockdown, I said, forget just sending the 100 rosés, just send the rosé that's available in England. It's an English trade press article. And so I've got 30 rosés that are available from Languedoc in England. So dull, which is quite a shock because I know there are some really exciting rosés out there. So what are the buyers doing? I don't know. They play safe. They've decided to all go for a similar style. So one of the biggest questions that I often get buyers contacting me and they say, we want pale, dry pink. We want high volume, low price, and the name Provence on the label. I said, you can't. Provence is expensive. Land is expensive. You can either have Provence or low cost. You can't have both. And there is this, I think actually a lot of shop buyers, I think are actually either quite lazy or I think they don't have confidence that the market is prepared to try different wines. I think this is a major, major problem. They don't have the confidence. They don't go out and say, you know what, this is a really nice wine. We're going to put our name behind it and we're going to try pushing it. And they don't. They just churn out the same old wine all the time. And it's very depressing.
Yeah, very unoriginal.
Yeah.
Very, very unoriginal. When we spoke last, you said you had a wine tasting and you had 300 wines that you were tasting at that time.
Oh, well, that's actually shrunk to 40.
Oh, good.
This was the wine trade show Vinitaly, which was cancelled because, of course, none of us could get into Italy. So they always start off this trade show with a competition. So they contacted me and said, can we send you 350 bottles to taste at home? Do you have somebody who can help you process the bottles? So I had my 24-year-old son with me and I said, are you happy? And he said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And so when you spoke to me, I was in my cellar sort of moving space to get 350 bottles in. And they've just last week, they said it's not going to be 350, it's going to be 40. It's going to be a day's tasting. So I'm going to get 40 Italian, which is a bit of a relief, really. The thought of a week tasting 350 Italian wines was a lot.
It's a hard day at the office.
Exactly, yes. But my cellar is now beautifully tidy.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Windridge, do you want to tell all of the local people where you are and what you're doing now and what you will be doing in the future?
Yeah, great, Leslie. Thank you so much for that. So we're located in Darnestown, 15700 Darnestown Road. Currently, we are open for to-go sales. And then we also offer free delivery in Montgomery, Frederick, and Howard County. We're hoping that the governor is going to, and Executive Elrich are going to lift some of the restrictions soon so we can get you all back out to the farm, because it's really where we want to interact with our customers, is out here on the farm, so we can show you the vineyards and you guys can come out here and enjoy what we do.
Thank you so much. And I just want to share the book with everyone. Liz, can they find the book online?
It's on Amazon, yeah.
On Amazon.
If you can get the English version without the gray bit at the bottom, you get pictures in it. For some reason, they decided the American market didn't want pictures.
We love pictures.
Oh no, don't ask.
We love
No
pictures.
idea why no pictures, but anyway, I had all these really lovely pictures. So if you can get the English version, it has pictures without the gray bit.
We'll recommend that to our customers too. We like to
Okay.
recommend books.
Yeah. So I don't know whether there'll be a second edition or whether I do something totally different. I haven't quite decided. I've got to work on that one because things have changed so much since I first wrote the book. I just have to see. I want pictures. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'd sort of, I was hoping to come over to America and do a bit more research on Rosé, but I guess that's going to be next year, maybe sometime. So we shall have to see. I should carry on working from home for the time being.
Well, if you come, is your daughter still here? Is she still in
My
the States?
daughter actually had to, no, she never made it over. My daughter applied for, she's just finished university at home, which has been a bit difficult. And she applied for an internship at the Smithsonian, which isn't happening. So, yes, she's still at home. And I still have a 24-year-old and a 21-year-old at home for the past 3 months. It's been wonderful.
Is your grocery bill rising just like everybody else's?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we shall see. Maybe the Smithsonian next year. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. Yes, and when you come over to the States, please stop by Maryland, and we'll show you around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Liz.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy Memorial Day. Be safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.